You're listening to Techsuite for the C-suite, where we bridge the gap between technology and executives. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, Jordan. First of all, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Well, before we dive deep, could you give a brief introduction to what you actually do and how you just grew up learning about blockchain?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think like everyone or like most people, we don't start with the solar punk movement, cypherpunk. We just hear about Bitcoin, Ethereum, and you see people making a lot of money, and you're like, oh, these people are anarchists, or they're doing like really weird tech, right? But then you keep seeing the tech evolve. They're still making even more money, and there's even more people getting in, right? And in my case, like it was really probably 5, 6 years ago during the masters, where I started learning more and more about not just Bitcoin because I had already previously heard about it, but really Ethereum. And you really had the teacher that started saying, "Hey, did anyone buy Ethereum?" And you had a couple students in the class that said, "Hey, I bought Ethereum, like about $100." And so you're like, "Okay, this is interesting. Maybe I should look it up, right?" And obviously, like I bought it a little bit back then, but what really pushed me over is going from not just Ethereum, but to all the different applications and use cases. And specifically, I'll be honest, I think that for all the good and bad that came with 2021, the speculation bubble, this brought like hundreds of millions of people into the space. And is specifically what caught my attention even more is with regards to NFTs, gaming, and what it can do for creators. So that's really when I got into this. Of course, I've been working advising a couple of projects, but that's really my core focus. And I'm just excited about how Web 2 and Web 3 can be bridged and how we can really simplify the storytelling. And as much as it's important to understand the history of where blockchain is coming from, it's also important to understand where we can go from here.
So you're not the typical techie, more like I am, who got into like, oh, I just want to build and learn the tech. You're more like, oh, this actually is cool, and there's so many people here. Like, what can we do?
Yeah, I mean, I remember I had a talk a while back with Julien Bouteloup of Stake DAO, and he was saying he was playing like Counter Strike, and he was like in school, and he was like he just heard about it, and he was like, yeah, why not, you know? And obviously he's part of like the tech like OGs, but it's just like everyone has their own story. I have like Chang, that I call my mentor. She actually was there in 2010, 11, and she was offered to be paid in Bitcoin, and her husband back then well, which makes sense, told her, "Nah, don't accept the proposal because you don't know where this is going to go." But like everyone has their own stories, and that's what's pretty funny is like in the end we're like all in this and seeing the potential.
Yep.
And of course, we have a different vision depending on when you entered. But in the end, those that are still here, like there's a reason.
Yeah, I feel like there's some shared ground at least between all of them, between like the full-on speculators, the doomsayers, and the just techno-optimists. I think there's like a shared thing, and you just have to find it through conversation and so on.
Yeah.
Um, so, talking about blockchain, how would you explain blockchain to an executive who has, well, next to no prior experience?
Sure. I think one of the best quotes that I actually ever heard is from 1KX. I was lucky enough, or I had the privilege to be at an event a couple months back, organized by Theta Capital, and basically they grouped together a lot of VCs, asset managers, funds from all around the world, not just crypto, just to talk about the future of crypto. And there was one of the best quotes I thought, which is blockchains are trust machines, and trust is a 28 trillion value market
Yep,
economy,
yep,
right?
yep,
And obviously when you look at the world we're in today, as we're going more and more digital with the advent of artificial intelligence, it just makes sense to study any type of tech, any type of product that can help bring this trust, right? And this is where I think blockchain really fits, is that you can finally see the information where it's coming from. And that's like such a game changer, because the number one question is like, are you in fashion? Are you a creator? Are you in finance? It doesn't matter. What matters is like users today want accountability. And so using blockchain today is becoming slowly but surely the best way to have this accountability, because people today are lying on their resumes. People are lying about the provenance of, clothing, like where's the cotton from, etc. So it's just at its core, blockchain is really there just to ensure trust and to have this link between companies and their consumers or just individuals. Like that, I would say that's the simplest way to put it.
Also, the trust machine works within social as well. Like right now, much of the space is talking social.
Yeah.
Oh, is social going to be the next big thing? I think social is not going to be the next big thing. I think apps on social, tying together all the DeFi and the incentives built before, maybe. Um, but I think you've got a point there where you can actually track somebody's record just because you have all the data available.
Yeah, and I think even like going back to just at a very basic example of like HR, right, recruitment, is
Yep.
that if you take blockchain, if you have information that is on chain that is visible, if you can have my resume, if you can have recommendations, if you can know my previous work, if I actually put it on chain, then that gives you also more, in a way, ammunition, right, to select me as a candidate. Whereas if you just browse LinkedIn and people are just inventing certifications at Harvard, and I think it's Evan from Disco. Uh,
LinkedIn certifications, man. You just sorry, you
yeah,
got me.
I mean,
I have
like,
a friend of mine who I know isn't technical, and the post he put out about passing some Google AI certification made it sound like
yes.
he got his master's from Stanford.
I mean, that's what it is, and I respect. I respect that. Don't get me wrong. Like, the initiative is great, and it's good if you did the certification. That's great. The issue that I have is people that do not do the certification and that put it on because, like, Harvard might check. Of course, if you're like a graduate, but if you did like a certification out of like 50,000, 100,000 people, they're not going to fact check every detail unless you call Harvard directly, right? So that's kind of the issue. And Evan of Disco, she pointed that out. Like she was saying, like I forgot the number, 40 or 50% like lie on these certifications online. So just that from an HR perspective, we're not going like hardcore smart contracts technical. It's really just a basic use case of like, can I trust this person? Can I hire this person and they're not going to screw up everything? So
Well, that's probably the hardest question to answer in recruitment, right? Like, if you can solve the problem of knowing who's good, that's already probably $1 billion market in itself.
if not more, like I mean that's why like it's really interesting, like you have projects like Zapperfy, right, where you can see everything on chain. You can see every collection, who's buying it, who's talking about it. And you could imagine a future, not saying that will be there, but like where not just recruitment but just even like a Tinder social, right, where you can see what they bought on chain, who are their friends, what did they like, etc. And I can definitely see that happening in the crypto space in the coming year, if not already. The question is, can that go to like more traditional companies? And that's a big question mark. But it can also be very interesting if you're like a company and you're doing like, like meetings like 2 times per year where you get your
Yep.
employees together. You can mash them up together and say, hey, who likes this? Who likes this? And instead of just like randomly saying, I like to play video games, you could actually have the proof on chain and just put people together,
Yeah, and
right?
you already know, kind of like where right now social media is a silo. So if Facebook were to come out, Meta, sorry, to come out with the functionality, they would have all the data. If they would then put together their Facebook, Instagram, what else do they have? Threads now. But that's it. Like they don't have my YouTube. Like
Yeah.
I am a heavy user of Instagram and YouTube, also some Twitch live streaming, gamer type, but they don't know because I'm not engaging with Instagram content about Counter Strike, though I play it a lot and I watch a lot of Twitch around that. And my YouTube is also non Counter Strike heavy. My YouTube is more NFL heavy, whereas my Instagram even isn't. So I'm watching more sports and highlights on YouTube. And if you had that all in one network, I would not be worried about privacy in that sense, in terms of people just knowing my general interests. And that would be a valuable match because even then, for gifting, there's a startup in Zurich that is actually building an AI chatbot just to message people and get to know what to gift. So for Christmas, for example, you hit up Sam and you're like, oh, what should I gift him? You don't know. And then this chatbot will send me a random message and I will respond. And out of that response, they will craft like suggested gifts.
Yeah.
But if all the data was already available, they could just leverage it on chain, do some data mining, and then just use it to do
and
recommendations.
and exactly, and I mean like you already look at Web 2, like data analytics, that's a huge market. And I think it's going to become even bigger with like actual like on-chain data. Like we could actually merge it together, right? Like you're looking at Nenson, Dune Analytics, and like right now it is very niche, right? You need to do your dashboard or pay someone to do it, but down the line in a couple years, as the industry keeps growing, it's going to become so obvious that that is worth a fortune. That data, and it's not even something that is like hidden, because today companies will tend to keep
Yep.
that data private because it's obviously for the algorithms. But like down the line, the data is going to be public, but just still complicated to understand. So having people who have skills to actually process that is going to become so key, right? So
The only interesting thing about that also is with privacy, because some information I don't want to disclose.
yeah, that's a
So
good point.
there's also a fine line between, oh, we're building this cool thing where it all works together, but on the other hand, it's kind of cool that only Google knows some stuff.
Yeah, that's honestly that's a great point. I'm very curious to know what your thoughts are on this, because it's true. Like I actually would argue that a lot of people don't care that much about their privacy, which is not. I'm not saying that's a good thing. That's a bad thing, right? But
Depends.
like everyone is happy to use Google Maps, and there's very few people that would be, I refuse to use Google Maps because I do not want to give information, because then you're blocking like 95% of the apps that the world is using today, right? So it's like finding the right balance between information that you want to keep private or not. But in the end, like I think that that's maybe an obsession that comes from the history of like blockchain and cypherpunks of like keeping it private with cryptography. I think that for
I think
yeah,
there's also the question of, well, yeah, I'm down to give Google my data because I use their service, but am I
yeah,
down to also give the whole world my data? I think that's the difference that I would
yeah.
be concerned with as just a casual user, just outside of my tech and crypto background.
No, that's a great point. I mean, it's true. Today, you go to any store and they ask for your email address, like whatever product it is. And it's
Yep.
true. Sometimes you're like, do you really need that information? So,
Now, like you mentioned Google Maps, like Google knows. Like I just logged into Facebook after what was it, been like 5 to 8 years again, because I heard some people say that I should make Facebook Reels as well, and I haven't been heavy on the content, but I'll be in 2024. So I was like, okay, just let me check if I even have a Facebook and what it needs to publish on Facebook, and then while diving through the settings just to figure out how to get my Facebook up. I saw, oh, they have this new whole meta collection where all your data is stored in just one place. So they have your I saw my Instagram was connected to it somehow, my Facebook was connected to that, and I was like, "What do you guys have?" And then they said, "Oh,
what do you guys
this
have?
is your home location and like pinpoint accurate." And I'm like, "Yes, I used Instagram. I haven't used Facebook. Why am I logged in on Facebook and now I see this? Oh, because it's the Meta account overview suite."
Yeah,
And I'm like, "They already do that." Um, so yes, they know, and now they revealed they know. Well, they revealed it in Cambridge Analytica how much they know. um, and that's when it popped up. But nobody cares. I don't care. They have it. The only difference it would make is if that dashboard would be public. So, like, if I could go and type in, "Oh, hey Jordan, what's your Facebook most likely home location?" and then you, with me right now, I would be fine. But imagine you're, for some reason, either you're highly wealthy, so you may have some people want to rob you. Maybe you're a girl, and that also changes things just because of how the world works. There's a lot
yeah,
more scrutiny if you're a girl, and if you could go just look at Facebook and see, oh, this is a girl I would like to meet and know her home location. Like if she decides to post stories of going to the same cafes every day, okay,
yeah,
sure, that's what she revealed, but she didn't choose to reveal that home location if that was to be public. So I think we need to be more careful around that. But I think most people aren't careful when they share stuff. So I think the actual act of sharing something, I don't mind, but that is something to keep in mind.
And yeah, I think there's a certain impatience, when you're signing into using a product where you just accept a lot of things. And very few actually go through the pages, like the 3 to 10 pages of actually like, I accept to give that information under that circumstance. So, but I think that one thing that, companies like, Google, Facebook do very, very well is it's very easy to use. And I think going back to blockchain, but specifically also Web3, like there's two indicators that I wish we use way more. And these are more like traditional Web2 indicators. They are called CES and NPS. So CES is customer effort score, and
Hmm.
NPS is net promoter score. And basically, what it means is how easy is it to use, and would you recommend it? And so it's very interesting because that is like millions and millions, if not billions, of dollars in Web2, where every day we send surveys to employees or users. Did you like the new Nespresso? Did you like your Apple computer? Da, 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 right? And so I wish that in Web3 we had a similar thing because there's a lot of companies or products in Web3 that I would highly, highly recommend, right? And I don't want to shoot any like put any product down. Let's take Ledger, okay? So Ledger, if you're in crypto, you need Ledger, okay? Like I would argue that you
Yep.
highly need either Ledger or something similar, right?
Like you technically need any kind of hardware wallet, or you want a third party to contractually guarantee all of it.
Exactly.
Um,
So like, okay, so I don't want to put Ledger down, so I'll give another example. Ledger and Trezor, right? So the
no,
thing is
the
like,
the one issue with Ledger is they have over this year, over 2023, repeatedly shown to not have security in their operations while being in the company that is securing billions of dollars of our on-chain funds in self-custody. That's kind of
well,
like the thing, but I also agree, like there's
I mean,
no
I
other
guess
hardware device I want to
you would
use.
have to have someone from Ledger on to defend that point. But I took Ledger, but I could have taken honestly any product or any layer one. Like basically, my point is that there's a lot of things that you would highly recommend because they're very important
I
for
still
or even
recommend Ledger
right
personally.
exactly. So no, but exactly.
Like
So
because I don't have a choice. Also the hardware is still good enough. At least
no,
I
but
feel like
you
yeah.
and I think that that's crucial, and that
Yeah.
doesn't go to only Ledger; it goes to a lot of products, right? And that I think that's the problem with a lot of builders in the space is that they don't have this kind of Web2 mass adoption mindset of like my product. It's not just about recommending the product; it's how easy is it to use. Like, can
Yeah.
someone other than my team or my close friends do an effort to use it? Like, can anyone use it? And if yes, how long does it take, and what's the effort? And right now, we're still at a stage where we go on Twitter or Farcaster or other apps, and we're like, "Hey, do you like my product? Please share comments." But you don't. First of all, that's flawed, but it's better than nothing. But second of all,
Yeah.
you don't even know if the people replying are even using your product. So that's also another thing where I wish I'm looking forward to like more attestations, or credentials around like prove that you use my product and you can review it and you could also get rewarded for it. So like I want that user experience to be like not just for builders but for like the mass adoption of people. And I think like going back to what we discussed at the beginning of the podcast, like around meme coins, what is really interesting is that for a lot of retail, it's not easy understanding that you need to have like MetaMask, right? If you want to start buying meme coins. But a lot of them are willing to do the effort. That's really interesting. You go to Telegram
Yeah.
groups and people are
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
how do I install that? Because they're willing to go above and beyond, even though it's quote unquote complicated, because they see the benefit, right?
Well, the benefit of potentially making millions or getting
Or
shit
losing
on.
everything. But that's a
Um,
different story. But I think it's like in cases where you really want to use a product, you don't care how complicated it is. But most
yeah.
of the time, you're not at a stage where your product is incredibly appealing for various reasons. You're more at a stage where you have an interesting innovation, but people will not go the extra step unless there's an airdrop, a money incentive, or you're a close friend. So, and that's for me
Yep.
is the problem. Like in Web2, we have companies have that focus. They're much slower, but they have this focus on what do my user want, my customers. How can I cater to it? And they don't all do it perfectly, but there's this effort which we don't really have in Web3.
Yeah, the general idea in Web 2 is more like, oh, I actually need somebody who is on fire so I can put out their fire. While in Web
Yeah,
3, it's more like, oh, I would like this, or I would make money off this.
yeah,
And this is the fire that other people should now see. Like, why is nobody using my product? And then you have products that are just awesome and everyone starts using it. And then on Twitter, people are like, why are they all using that platform? It's not technically any good. Well, but the way they build the platform, even though it may be worse than the thing you do, which is similar, is usable and promoted, or like at least phrased, might not even be promoted, just the web page is built in a way, but it solves my problem instead of it's a technical thing.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. Is like in the end, keeping the focus on. And Web3, you can work on any topic that already exists and like include blockchain elements. But in the end, it's like, is that useful? It's the same with
Yeah,
tokens. Do you need in a game to have a token? Yes or no? Do you need to add a token to reward in a DAO? And so nobody has the perfect answer to that. But I think we're not thinking enough because usually it's just easier to add a token. It's just easier to add like a technical thing because it will sound cooler, it will look cooler. But in the end, sometimes just clicking on a button and it works is the go-to,
yeah.
right?
With all that, how would you actually explain the benefits and the trade-offs, like positives and negatives of blockchain, to an executive?
Um, I think the main thing, number one, like going back to what we said at the beginning, is like what industry are you in? Uh, I think that a lot of executives are open to innovation because they've seen the examples, like even looking back at Nokia and all that. You need to stay ahead of the curve, and even if you're not ahead, at the very least, you need to try things. And it's very
Yep.
interesting, even when you look at like luxurious companies or fashion, like LVMH, where they've tried NFTs, they've tried like dabbling with blockchain because they realize that it might not work, but if there's an increasing demand for their users to actually know the provenance and be also able to have digital, you buy an NFT and you also get the physical version, and then you're connected to LVMH where they know that they don't know your identity, but they could give you a discount based on how much you bought, etc. So it's all these little different things where I think for an executive, it's really being ahead of the curve of like, you need to try AI, you need to try blockchain. You don't need to go into like hardcore technical. You can start with very basic things. Like most companies will just start with like a digital like reward program, right? Like Starbucks. You don't even need to name an NFT. It's just finding a way to reward and also get closer to your users. And I think that going back to the idea of trust and blockchain is that what it really enables is your community and your users to grow and trust you more, and like on both ways, right? Like that's really the end goal, is how can you take your product or your company and just get closer to your customers, because if they're happy, they're going to recommend whatever you do, right? So that I think is a starting point, is like, even as a developer or as a service company, when you go to these executives, is like, okay, your focus is this, these are your pain points, and with blockchain, there's 10,000 things that we could do, but really, I think the main added value is focusing on building NFTs for your users or building a blockchain so we can see the transaction. Like, so it's just finding that perfect example that fits their need. And I don't think that every executive will have the same problem, right? So some are just curious and a bit worried. So, and will just want to understand, am I going to lose money or are my customers going to get scammed? And I think that's the first thing, is like trust and reputation. Going back to this notion of blockchains or trust machines, that even if you look at creators, like I work quite a lot with these creators in fashion and artists, and they don't care about tokens and crypto. What they care about is, can I reach my audience even more? And will they lose trust in me if I use this technology? Or on the contrary, will I have more users and will I be able to have more trust with my loyal kind of users there? And so that's why it expands to music and to all these different things.
And especially for the arts, it's been more of a benefit from what I heard talking to different artists, where they can actually prove that the artwork will still be around, or that the owner is actually the owner, or at least just prove that he's the initial buyer
Yeah.
of that artwork. So you're creating some sort of provenance. So the actual, if you're talking about physical art, the tying of the physical art to the actual painting itself is something that is being experimented on. Like the artist of the Porsche 911 collection, Patrick Vogel, is now working with an Austrian company, like they're big into the banking security field, and their blockchain is more like an innovation play, which has actual heavy use cases. Like I have that demo kit lying around here, so I'm playing I'm playing around with it. And what they will allow you to do is if you scan the physical artwork, you can move the NFT. So if, for example, the artwork behind you where you have beautiful art, if that was stolen, I could scan it and transfer that NFT to me. So I would also on the blockchain be the one who stole it. Or like if you talk illegal case, I just bought it, and I know that I will also get the NFT because you can't keep them because it's tied. And other people will be like, oh, I will sell the physical art separate from the NFT, and I don't care about it. And then you may have the situation where you bought the NFT on the blockchain, and then you still have to find the original like painting holder
Yeah,
in the
and
real world.
especially in the age of AI, right? Like we can imagine in a couple years that it might become critical to actually have this proof of authenticity that, hey, I'm the first one who did this drawing, who did
Oh
this
yeah.
work before like AI starts, in the model using your work, and it'll be harder to prove down the line. So that's also something we're still very early, but it feels like a great future use case.
It is awesome. Even if you just can prove that you're the initial one, you don't even have to prove that the physical still exists or whatever, right?
Yeah,
Because
that's a good point.
what Midjourney in their terms and in their FAQ, Midjourney is one of the biggest
Yeah.
image generators for those who are unfamiliar. And what they do is you just prompt in a text, say like, "Oh, I want a nice, beautiful blonde German girl running around in the Alps because that's what you feel like,"
I see
and
what you
then
feel like. Yeah.
you get that. Oh no, that just came to mind because I saw Heidi on the Swiss in the Zurich airport. They have if you roll out with the train, they have like Heidi playing, and I
Mm,
just transported that to Germany because I'm in Germany right now. And then you get the image, and if you can prove that the images that are used to train the AI are from you, legally they are blinded to pay you a commission or need to inquire you about using your image. But because they just scrape the internet, they have no way of knowing. So if you use blockchain technology to create the provenance that, oh, you're the original first creator of that artwork. Oh yeah, we used it in that model. Here's whatever, like $1,000, whatever. I don't know
yeah.
what the appropriate amount of money would be. Um, that's powerful, and you don't even need to connect the artwork to say the physical.
Yeah, I think there's like a huge business in the coming years for that, even from a lawyer regulation perspective, is like
No,
helping
they're already
artists,
running wild.
creators, anyone just to prove the authenticity, right?
The
But
lawyers are already running wild in this space.
yeah, for sure, for sure. But
Don't
I
get
think
me
also
wrong.
also one of the kind of use cases where I'm very excited, going back to kind of creator things, is like the concept of phygital, right? So for those that are
Yep.
not familiar, it's like I can buy an NFT of like a sweater, like a collab collection, but I will also get the physical piece. And it's very interesting because it's kind of the best of both worlds, is that you receive the physical thing that you can actually wear, but at the same time, there's actually the actual proof on chain that you bought it, that you're the owner, and in a certain way, you're part of history because you were the first one to buy that collection. So, and also down the line, even for collabs and partnerships, like I think like a lot of really cool use cases that we already see appearing is take going back to fashion is like today a fashion show is very selective and VIP, right? You only have stars and celebrities, but imagine in the coming years if you can actually have your most loyal customers and you have the proof on chain that they bought X amount of clothing or that they supported you for X amount of time.
Yep.
And you could invite them not just to physical fashion shows, but even in the metaverse, if you do a partnership, for example, with Yuga Labs, you could do a digital fashion show with 10,000 people, but only those that have this NFT from this specific collection or bought X amount of NFTs could come in. And so it just is another way to, and going back to your question for executives, I think one of the best use cases, even if we go a little bit outside of blockchain, even though it's linked to NFTs, is purely marketing and just growing your community that way. It's like your Coca-Cola, you reward every user that buys X amount with an NFT. They have the option, obviously, they can create a
Yep.
wallet, something very simple, and then you just reward them down the line and invite them to events. And it's just a better way to create that connection, right?
Or you just do. potentially on the holidays you're like, oh, because you bought 1,000 cans of Coke this year, we'll send you a special Coke glass or some chocolate or a special Coke bottle where
Yeah.
the bottle itself is Christmas themed, and that Christmas themed Coke bottle is not available anywhere for sale, but you have the 2023 version of that.
Yeah. There's
So it's a
that.
collectible piece where you're like, oh, who cares? But like, if you buy 1,000 cans of Coke, that's like three a day. Probably you do care
You
about the
do,
Coke
yeah.
bottle.
I think it's not about judging, right? It's like people are very proud of these kinds of things, right? So, and also like instead of receiving, like a mail where it might go in your spam, like in the future there might be less spam also even just on the blockchain. Like if you have a wallet specific to Coca Cola,
Mm,
no, of course there's always spam ongoing, right? But you're not gonna have
look,
like, well,
look at
actually
your
that's
OpenSea.
true.
Look at your OpenSea.
Yeah, okay, that is true. That is true.
For those who don't know, OpenSea is the
That is a good point.
marketplace for NFTs, and you just if you have any kind of valuable NFT, you will get any kind of spam sent to your wallet because people want to advertise that, oh, he holds that. Well, yeah, he just got it sent and he can't
Yeah,
transfer it out
poor
because if you
Vitalik.
yeah, because if you interact with that NFT, you don't know if it's actually a scam and it will just rip out all your other NFTs. So you just leave it. So you're technically a holder.
Yeah,
Um,
actually, that's a good point. Even for anyone that's not familiar, is that also
yeah,
to when you interact with OpenSea, right, with your wallet, for example, MetaMask being one of the most famous
yeah,
ones, it's a good habit to have multiple wallets, and you have your wallet with everything precious on it, but
yeah.
you connect it to Ledger and you keep it safe, and you use what we call like a throwaway wallet to just do
Yeah,
random
managing
transactions.
security is one of the biggest trade-offs. If you talk to especially companies, that is why I love centralized exchanges in the B2B sense, because
Hmm.
I can just throw away that worry by telling people, oh, you know Coinbase? Yeah, they have a custodial service. They will do all the wallet stuff for you.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to have wallets as APIs? Well, in the German market, there are smaller players. There are also players with bank licenses. We can do that for you. Like, there's no worry. Even for your users, we can create wallets via API, and the bank is gonna hold them. Like, you know the bank, you trust the bank. Yeah, sure. Okay, we got
Yeah, sure.
security out of the way.
No, that's a good
No,
point.
but that isn't the attainable for most users, and it's also not the ideal of crypto, where you actually not your keys, not your money, right?
Yeah,
Where you
but
actually then don't have your keys, but it's the easiest way to onboard, and then as you get more educated, you move to the self custody. Is my
yeah, no,
point of view.
that's a great point, and I think it goes back to the user journey, whether that's an executive or anyone in retail, is that most people will start from Coinbase or something like Binance. They'll buy crypto there. Either
Yep.
they'll won't look at it because they just want to trade it on the year, or they're going to try trading. But once you go down the crypto rabbit hole, you realize that, yeah, self custody, I might get MetaMask, I might get Frame, I might get another type of wallet. And then there's something called a decentralized exchange where I can actually trade tokens that are not yet on Coinbase. And so it's just like the world then is like your oyster, kind of like there's so many things that
Yep.
can be done. But in the end, what matters is your security and safety. And so that's why
It's
it is simply simple to use Coinbase, right?
it's kind of like, oh, you're secure walking around the parts of town you know, but if you get a car where you'll maybe a little bit more exposed, you can actually travel so much further. But then if you get a fast car where you actually have to manage the car and you might not be able to pack all your stuff, and then you have multiple kind of vehicles for transportation, you can travel the whole world. I
Yeah.
think that kind of
But if your car is too
sums it
pretty,
up.
people will want to steal it. That's
Oh
the
yeah, and
problem.
that's why you have storage for those kind of pretty cars, and you watch where you go. Also, like with the valuable NFTs, I'm too technical. Where I actually just check all the smart contracts when I have to interact with the valuable NFT, and then I know that I'm fine. But that doesn't work for 99.9% of the crypto users.
I mean, that's
So
why, like, I mean, not to shill that specific wallet, but I do like Rabi wallet. It's not as known, but it's just because
yeah,
it gives you the notification of like you're interacting with a smart contract that is maybe not safe. You're interacting with a platform or a website that has
yeah,
just been created, etc. So having that extra layer of security is good when you don't have the technical knowledge to be able to kind of read the data. Although I
yeah.
would argue once again that
It's not a
a user
substitute.
should not know this, and that's why we're going back to the point of a lot of people are arguing that you should have to sign up with email, right? And so that's another debate of, yes, you're giving away your KYC, but at the same time, it's much easier to use. You just put your email
Yeah.
and you're done, right?
I,
So
I just think you should have both options. Like in the
yeah,
end, the web page. What does the web page need? Oh, a wallet address. So like, screw you telling me that I need to not log on with email. Screw you for telling me I should only use a wallet that I bring myself. But also screw you for not allowing me to bring my own wallet.
yeah,
Like,
no, yeah.
you just need my wallet address. You don't need anything else. If you need my mail, prompt me via mail. If I don't sign in for it, you'll get my mail, and then you have both my wallet address and my mail, and I have brought my own wallet. It's not like the dynamics and privies of the world right now that do the easy signups with email and then create a blockchain wallet for you, kind of like the sign in with Google in the Web 2. It's not like those don't allow you to just connect your own wallet. You just have to configure it. Like, just
Yeah,
please give me the
and
option.
just
Like,
having
we're in a
the
world where I
option.
can.
Yeah, I think that that's what's crucial is like building these options, but also that's why I'm kind of like excited about the years to come. Is that we're starting to see more and more innovations in the Web3 space, crypto and blockchain, where we're giving these options, sometimes useless options today, but we're
Yep.
getting there, and like at the very least, these options are being built so that people for now are more technical, so they can understand. But in the coming years, it's just gonna be like an iPhone where you don't know like how it was coded and built. You just use it, you're happy, and you're done. But in a more
Yeah.
decentralized way. So that's also another aspect,
Yeah,
right?
just there's also, I think there's use cases that aren't even thought of, that we don't even know and don't even think of yet, that nobody knows. For
Yeah.
example, with the internet, nobody would have predicted that we will use the internet to get around in US cities just because public transport will break down and you will not have your own car.
I mean,
Uh,
on this notion of actually public transport, like there's a use case that I don't know if it's going to be like with NFTs or just like AI or VR, but like if you think about it in planes, right? 20 years ago, you didn't even have like a screen in the economy and you didn't mind. Today, if you don't have a screen in the economy to watch TV, you go mad, right?
yep.
So it's interesting to think of removing the crypto aspect just from an NFT or interoperability perspective. How is just traveling going to evolve? Like in your plane, maybe in 5, 10 years, maybe you'll have like even an economy, a VR headset, or a way to connect your wallet maybe and put your NFT in a very small game on the plane or something like that. And it
Yeah.
like that's something that I totally see happening. The question is when, who's going to adopt it first, and that's
Yeah.
going to be a massive unlock even for blockchain and Web3, because if you start having these airline companies that have a lot of money and they start wanting to just experiment with like, how do I improve the experience of my users on a plane? Oh, they could connect their wallet. Oh, they could watch tutorials, etc. Then it's just a whole new game, right?
Yeah. Also, if you bring your own character, I think that also brings together brand corporation a little bit more. Like, if you have, for example, you're a plane company and you allow other people to bring, for example, a nape or a punk or kind of other, just their own image potentially that they have created,
Yeah.
and you have your own character in that game. The game doesn't care what characters being, like, how the characters look. Like, if you just play like Doodle Jump, Tetris, whatever, you can just have your own little character or face on the stone coming down in Tetris, and like, you would flip out about it. Like, if you had that today in your game in an airplane, you would see Instagram stories, TikTok videos, all over social media of just
Yeah,
that
I
free
mean,
marketing.
you just also Web3. If you buy a
That's me.
digital, but in the end, you're not even really owning it, because if you get banned by the company, then you lose everything that you've invested in the game. And so, going back to this example of the plane, where you have your gaming asset on the wall and you can connect, and if you have games that have partnerships and you can just bring your character to another game, as you mentioned, the TikTok, the Instagram, like the stories, like that's going to be such an unlock. Is that when we link entertainment with the tech, when it's like so easy to use that you're an influencer, you're just happy to put your Mario character that you customize and bought somewhere in a marketplace, and that's also
Yeah.
going to be just very interesting as an unlock, right, for the whole industry, and give also ideas to other companies where they're going to be, wait a second, the planes are doing this, the games are doing this, maybe in the cars we need to do this, maybe in the energy, we need to do this, when you even go, get gasoline or whatever, like every industry is going to change. And that's why, like, I also like the quote from Abigail Johnson from Fidelity, which says that blockchain technology can kind of be a massive unlock to restructure internet, right? Like, an internet is so broad. It's like, as we go more digital, anything can change, and that's why it's like you can take anything today, any industry, implement blockchain, implement AI, and just play around with it. And I'm not saying that it's going to be good or work, but that out of everything being built, there's a couple things that are going to stick and inspire like the rest of the world, right? So that's where we're at. I feel is this kind of trying things out to inspire the rest of the world.
Also, when trying things out, how would you balance the different perspectives of, like, say, a builder, so like a more technical person like me, an investor who just looks at it from a market opportunity, from a
Yeah.
fit, from potentially a financial perspective, versus the just end consumer, and also the trader, so like the potential meme coin trader or the one in crypto who's just here to make the couple bucks, who set up MetaMask through a Telegram chat.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think once again it depends on what the focus is that we're talking about. Like if you're looking at social, going back to the example of Farcaster, for those that are not aware, it's kind of a mix between Reddit, Twitter, Tumblr, kind of where.
That's where it
But
is right now, yeah.
yeah, but what's interesting about it is that at least the way it started is that it's very qualitative. You have people that are obsessed by technology, by blockchain, by crypto, but there's different channels to even talk about soccer, about any topic you want. And so what I really enjoy about it is this quality element. And so for someone from retail, they might not know Farcaster, right? But if you hear about, oh, there's quality conversations and I can learn, that can bring them to Farcaster, and vice versa. VC will see the traction in numbers and be interested. But even if we take like a step back, I think that in the end, builders care about innovation. VCs care about innovation that can actually have market shares and impact, the economy and kind of like bring a return. In retail, I would say it's kind of the in between where they might care about the innovation, but it's just what is the value for me. So in the end, I think the centerpiece is value, just in a different way, and that's why it's interesting to look at crypto and Web3, because value is not necessarily the thing that is always pushed the most forward. It's more the profit speculative element. And so I'm very curious. I don't have a crystal ball to see if we're going to be able to shift away. Like blockchain as a technology is able to shift away because it's really a use case is traceability. But crypto Web3 still has this profit element that's at the center. And so the question is, do we need it? First of all, if we do need it, how much do we need it? Because currently it's the number one use case. But at the same time, you can't throw that away because of that, you're bringing hundreds of millions of new users. And because of that, they can also discover apps like Farcaster or OpenSea, etc. So it's really the trade-off. And I think that VCs do see this. It's also much easier for them to make money by investing in gaming projects, and they come out and they're going to make a lot of money. Uh, Whether that's utility or not, that's a different different thing, right? But I think that's where we're at in the space right now for anyone kind of like discovering. I think if you're coming in a space to make money, there's lots of opportunities. Also, you can lose money, so be careful. But I think for VCs, it's really just discovering what should I invest in. And I'll
Yeah.
finish on this thought is that, when I got into space a couple years back, I thought like most people, I'm going to invest in projects that have utility. A
Oh,
data marketplace. That sounds like a really cool idea. These
we
kinds of
get
things. And then in the end, you real
2021 meta
yeah,
utility.
exactly.
We
I'm like,
want
wow,
utility. Well,
yeah,
there's none.
a data marketplace. Wow, a way to trace energy and sustainable. Wow, that sounds so cool. Wrong. What works is buying PFPs, NFTs, and you make a fortune. And so
Yeah.
that's also a cool thing in itself. But going back to this, it's like, as a VC, your perspective is very different. You want that return, right? And there are VCs that care about the long term, right? But there are also others who just are there like retail for short profit. So it's just finding the right balance.
Yeah, one of the things in there is that you highlighted really, really well is we focused a lot as the space on utility, 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 while all we had was memers. So what
Yeah,
ended up
that's a
pumping
good quote.
is the memes. The memes ended up pumping.
Yeah,
Also, the guys selling utility were memers. We just didn't know. They were
yeah.
selling memes of utility to us where there's no
that's
utility
like that's
behind it,
that's
there's no
true.
project behind it.
Yeah,
And then in the end, what you ended up with is the memes and people being like, oh, why did I get scammed? Well, you just didn't get scammed. There's no utility behind it. You just didn't do your proper due diligence. Also, some cases you actually did get scammed, so you have to be careful. But in
yeah,
general, that's something to watch out for, especially when you're trying to invest. The question is always, well, is there a potential market? Well, if there's a potential market, then the investment is always good. Kind of like the Silicon Valley saying of, if you have a great product, there will always be a way to monetize it. Well, Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, one of the biggest VCs in the startup world, and especially in tech, he said, if you have a product where you have users, I will bet you that I will find a way to monetize it. So he's kind of putting his whole reputation down on you being able to monetize a good product. Where in crypto we just think, oh, because it has a coin, it must have some value, and
Yeah,
we kind of get
that's a
lost in
good
that.
point. I mean, as much as I love Web3 gaming, I think most people that invest in it today or that are interested will probably argue that there's not a lot slash almost none at all of good actual Web3 games. There's very interesting elements. It might become really good, but as of now, it's more the tech is very interesting and the gaming, the on-chain, the social aspects are very interesting. And so people are kind of betting on the future of Web3 games, which is a safe bet, I would say. But it's just right now when you're looking at the valuation, of these projects, it's like in the hundreds of millions. And during the bull run, it was even more ludicrous, right? So it's like, once again, I'm not there to put a judgment and say that's good or bad. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I did make a lot of money on these Web3 games, and I still love them today. It's just understanding when you do your due diligence that sometimes you will make money as an investor by gambling more, not gambling, by investing in a narrative more than the utility. And I think that a lot of
Yeah.
people in the space that are still here to this day understand that narratives are very important, and narratives advance along tech because as you have attestations, zk, like really cool tech, then it gives also other ideas to memers, but at the same time the tech still progresses and the user experience is still progresses. So it's still a win in my book. Like we're getting there, everything's going to get better and better, but we're still not there yet at all.
Yeah, if you look at it from an investing standpoint, most of the projects that get the big 100 million, billion-dollar rounds or like valuations, it's always infrastructure to
Yeah.
then build some kind of other thing. So like the infrastructure for Web3 gaming is likely a $100 million seed A
Probably
round
even more. Yeah, probably
from
even
the
more.
pre-seed, just if they get some traction, because investors think, oh, if that's $1 billion market with Web3 popping up in the next 5 years, oh, I can get in at only 100 million valuation. Well, it's like in typical tech, you forget that you actually have to build a good product first. So it's probably not the best investment. Also, if it works out, it is. So that's why the infrastructure itself is the one thing that is funded the most,
Yeah.
though also fragmented the most. Where it's like, if you actually talk to developers, there's only 3 to maybe 5 actually really valuable infrastructure companies or tools, where most of that stuff is also open source. Whereas if you talk to investors, they have probably 20 projects in mind that do the same thing.
Yeah.
So that is also funny to look at it from a builder standpoint, where me as a builder, I see every single stupid idea raise 100 million from whatever investor it feels like, or do private rounds, and then you think, oh well, why should I even develop applications when I can just pretend to work for the ones building
Or open
applications and
source
get a hundred
or take a
million?
code that's open source and just like reproduce a meme coin or something like that. Pay a couple influencers and there you go. You can
You can
make
create
like,
a meme coin in 4 seconds.
yeah. Not that that's recommended, but yeah.
The code is all out there. There's even secure audited code from like OpenZeppelin, one of the biggest security and open tool development companies. They have an online tool where you can go and say, "Oh, I want in coin. I want the coin to be withdrawable, like everything that's paid into that coin should be withdrawable to my address. Yes, I want that. Oh, this is my address." They will give you the code, and I think they even have an option for you to deploy it. So that way you can point and click to your own meme coin.
But
Um,
I think
so
also, yeah, no, sorry to interrupt on that point. I think like we're talking about mass adoption and like having a lot of users, but actually I think a good counter argument is you also in Web3 and crypto do not need a lot of users to be successful. if you have 10,000 users, but that they're trading
Yep.
massive amounts of volume, I forgot the exact numbers of friend tech. For those that are not familiar, the idea of friend tech is, I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah.
It's basically, I have my own key, and if you like me and you think I'm popular enough, you can buy my key and you can also speculate on it. There might be utility where you can chat with me, but essentially it's really more a farming popularity game, kind of where you're selling keys and buying other keys. Obviously, it's not as
Mm.
bad as what I described, but it's pretty close to that. And there was massive volumes, but not necessarily a huge amount of users down the line. But it's just the volume was there. People kept trading them, so it just shows also in Web3. Going back to the speculative aspect, you don't necessarily need hundreds of thousands or millions of users for your product to work and for the VCs to be happy. But that's also the big question is like, are we building just for certain users that are interested in decentralization? Or are we trying to build for this mass adoption that everyone is aiming for? And honestly, I don't have the answer. I wonder if anyone has this. Like, who are we really building
Well,
for?
that depends, right? Like if you're building infrastructure, you're building for the developers to build the applications.
Yeah,
And that's where you can actually see, okay, what kind of project or company is actually doing a good job and what isn't. Though, like most investors just look at the economics and think, oh, the team is technical enough, they'll figure it out, um, which is just a lack of knowledge in my eyes. While if you're building for the individual, you just have to solve, like you said, a problem for the individual, and then if you solve that problem, you will get them for free as long as it's easy to use. Jeff Bezos said for his personal life, if he wants to do something, he reduces friction. If he wants to stop doing something, he increases friction. So if you want to stop smoking, you just don't buy cigarettes anymore. I know that's not how like those like addictions work, but from the general idea, if you stop buying cigarettes, it's harder for you to get them. So it's harder for you to smoke. So you'll
yeah,
you're way likely more likely to smoke less. If you want to smoke, you always carry a pack of cigarettes and you always have a lighter with you. Just even not having a lighter with you makes it more difficult because then you have to run around and ask people. Uh, and
I
that
think
adds friction. Also, in the application case, just to finish the point, if your sign up isn't as easy, that's friction, and I'll drop out.
yeah, that's a big problem. I think it's also interesting looking at projects that are trying. It's not easy at all to do both, like building infrastructure, but also tying it to kind of retail and use cases. I don't know if you're familiar with the project like Saga XYZ. If not, I especially if you're a builder developer, I'd highly recommend to check it out. But essentially, it's really any developer can create kind of their own chainlet, similar to kind of Cosmos, and you can build your own applications and have your users on that. And it's like just building kind of a cosmos of like hundreds and hundreds of projects. So for the developers, it's very easy to build, and then they incentivize users from all these different chainlets to interact with one another, which makes it really cool because they organize tournaments, gaming projects, but at the same time the core is very infrastructure for developers, right? So it just shows it's cool to see novel things like this where you're not just catering to one specific audience. Obviously it's also very tricky because VCs sometimes don't like when you're trying to do two things at the same time, but it just shows that having that aspect of not just speculative, but actually you're building something that might be speculative, but at the core, the infrastructure is not speculative. You're allowing people to build things, right?
Just look at Farcaster, where they're building the underlying protocol. So, like the infrastructure for Web3 social. So, like, oh, you're actually doing a decentralized social network, you're tying in wallets somehow, but there's
Yeah.
no blockchain there. Well, yeah, there's like the decentralized technology, but decentralized technology doesn't necessarily need a blockchain. Technically speaking, the big difference is, well, a blockchain means there's a record of history where you have a piece of data that is directly in front of another and they get tied together cryptographically, while as Farcaster works more as, oh, we have a lot of computers who store our social network, like our, whatever, say Twitter, our social graph, and then what we do is we agree that this is the whole state of how it works, but there's not no real like cryptography tying together the state transition like the trust machine uh, that you stated, just to explain that. And they're building the underlying while also having a client. So
Yeah.
because it's hard for you to say, okay, take Twitter. I think Twitter is awesome. I want to build Twitter, but another team should do my Twitter mobile app. That doesn't work. So what they do is they build both. They build the actual Farcaster that I described just right now, while they're also building the mobile app, the web app to use it, which is called Warpcast, and there are also other apps which use Farcaster that are not Warpcast, not from the team. They solve different problems.
Yeah.
One, for example, being Supercast, which is built by an awesome guy in Poland, and he just said, "Well, I'm a power user. I don't care about mobile. I just want to use desktop and have shortcuts because
Yeah,
I
that's
want to
good.
have a quick search function. I want to schedule casts like tweets. I want to have a shortcut to dictation. To if I'm using a MacBook, I can use Siri to input into my tweet and just tweet from voice, like voice to text, just integrate it into the browser. Those kind of things, or bookmarks, because the bookmarks don't exist in the client that the Farcaster team is building, and that way you have multiple kind of clients where, as an investor, you're saying, well, what is the actual value? Is it the underlying protocol? Is it the client? Well,
Yeah.
it is both, because if the network gets big, your default client may be the most polished one, but you're also profiting of the user base that another client brings in. So if you have a lot of power users coming in just for the power user client, then the underlying network still has more content that you can also show your people in your client. So that is one example where the building the two is actually necessary, because you need to build the infrastructure to actually have your app in the first place.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And there's actually something, it's related, but a different topic that I kind of wanted to address by going back to at the beginning of the conversation. I think, we mentioned a lot Facebook and Google in the beginning.
Yep.
And I think one of the biggest kind of problems today in unlocks is everything is siloed. Networks are siloed. And so let's take an example. You're an artist, you use Instagram for like 8 years or 10 years, and you take specific pictures of the city, right? So first of all your followers are locked on Instagram. If you go to Twitter, you have 0 followers. So you are going to have to talk to your users on Instagram and tell them, follow me on Twitter, but also follow me on LinkedIn and follow me on Farcaster. Right? So already there's this siloed networks. That's number one. Number two, if Instagram, for whatever reason, decides to change their algorithm, and they do that sometimes, right? So they say, well, this type of picture is not according to our rules anymore. But what if you're a photographer that always takes pictures in a certain style? Well, already you're not going to be showcased as much. And if your whole livelihood is around specific things like that, then you already have a drop in revenue. So why am I talking about this? I think it's the notion of not only silos and networks, but also algorithms. And so if you look at Web 2, if you look at things like TikTok, right, Google, everything is built on top of algorithms. And if you look at Google PageRank in the 90s with Page, they built the whole algorithm around referencing. And I think it's very important because where am I going with all this is that if you're looking at Web3, we don't really have this layer of like an algorithm that actually is used everywhere. And it's also very interesting because an algorithm on top of internet or Web3 would also be more decentralized and for the users. And I think that that's one of the key things, not just for creators, but even finance, is that if you're able to have, and that's one of the things actually that we're working on where I'm at, is that how can creators take their creative reputation on all these platforms, and how can they bring them anywhere, but not just from Web 2 to Web 3, but also if you do on-chain activities on Web 3. For example, if you have, I don't know, like a Gitcoin score. So basically you've interacted with Gitcoin, you've given money, you have like a score of how trustworthy you are. Or if you have a Bored Ape as an NFT, you could have a certain score within that community. But how do we aggregate all these data points and build an algorithm similar to what we saw with Google and TikTok to put it on top of Web3? And I think that for me, I think is going to be a massive unlock. And we're starting to see this, is when we're able to build algorithms that are not similar, but as strong, as powerful as those that exist in Web 2, which is very complicated because you have these centralized entities that have been building for decades, right? But
Yep.
if we're able to, you don't need to know another protocol, another project, but if you're able to agree on certain data points, and that can be in the algorithm, and another protocol knows, okay, you have that score, I can trust you. You're a creator from Instagram, and you come on Twitter. I don't, not on Twitter. You come on Farcaster, right?
Yep.
Well, oh my God, like you had 300,000 followers on Instagram. Well, let's give you a special score on Farcaster. that showcases to new users that even though you have 2 followers, in reality, you're a massive creator outside. And I feel that that is also a topic that I'm very excited about, is this siloed networks, digital reputation. I think that all these use cases, these companies like Intuition, building, like all these companies are focusing on this notion. And that for me is very exciting, you know?
You could also unsilo, sorry for the pun,
Yeah.
that into leverage for sponsorships. So say you have a large score on your unsiloed platform, but you don't have a large following on Farcaster yet. I can use that to leverage, say, a Farcaster agency do my media promotion for me and just get a share,
Yeah.
because they know through your algorithm, because they like that my 300,000 followers on Instagram are not botted, and I actually have a real audience, which is
Yeah.
a whole another issue, like gaming those kind of mechanisms, because we're in the space where money is so tied to anything we do that there's a lot of incentive for gaming any kind of mechanism. So the first thing
Yeah.
I think of with mechanisms is how can it not be botted?
But that goes back to the concept, right, of like cyber resistance, or like proving obviously that you cannot game, like I cannot, like a bot cannot have access to an airdrop, right, by
Yeah,
creating like
yeah.
a, and I think that going back to this idea of algorithm, if we're able to have like a score, for those that are not familiar, in SBT, for example, is something that I have on my wallet and I cannot give it to someone else, right?
It's like an NFT that can't be transferred is a soulbound token SBT, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
Awesome.
what if you have a score that is an SBT that reflects these data points? For example, I have 300,000 followers on Instagram, and I've also bought a Bored Ape, and I also have a good score in Gitcoin, etc. And you have this score already, you're proving that you are a human being. So already that number one use case, it, is that if you have this specific score that cannot be bought or sold, you prove that you're a human being. And why is that important in Web3? Well, lots of use cases. Number one, gas fees. You could actually say this person pays less gas fees because they have a specific score. They have been creative on this platform that is a partner. There's discoverability. You could also highlight on platforms like OpenSea artists that have a higher score because based on the algorithm, they have had this before, right? There's obviously voting, proving that you're not a bot, etc. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is that as we have more on-chain data, is how can we really build this large algorithm? Like in our case at Newcoin, we're focusing on creators and creative
Mm-hmm.
reputation, because we consider that creativity is so broad that a developer can be a creative, you know, an artist, a musician,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there's so much information there that if you make it decentralized, anyone can decide, do you think this is creative? Yes. Then you get a score in SBT, and then that can be used on other platforms, and you kind of build this algorithm, right? And I'm looking forward to, you know, how all these companies and projects together can, there's not like one company like Google that will own the algorithm. It's like how Web3 and the blockchain projects as a community can build an algorithm that can be competitive enough compared to Web2, which is not easy at all. But if we can reach that point, it's going to be such a massive unlock, I feel.
So basically, you're building the. I'm taking the silos, I'm putting it all together, I'm giving you the reputation, I'm also giving you tools to leverage that recommendation. It's like the whole system is basically what you're building at Newcon. Is that what I understood correctly?
Yeah, the going back to like one of our main focuses is the concept of collective intelligence power up. And what this really means is that, for example, Grimes is a really respected artist, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so if if they power you up, if they say, okay, Jordan, you're an artist that I respect,
Yeah.
well, this specific like or follow or power up on chain should be not only be on chain and visible to everyone, but also should increase my score, my SBT, much more than if someone with 2 followers or a bot that is non-creative powers me up. And so there's also this logic that we see on Twitter and Facebook where a like equals a like. Your grandmother likes your content is the same as if you
Oh,
have.
so if say Dr. Dre co-signs Eminem, that means way more than when I, as Sam,
Exactly,
just co-sign
exactly,
Eminem.
exactly. I like the old rap reference, but it's exactly this. And I think that's one massive unlock for Web3, is that we're focusing on creators, but it's very large. But I think it's that today you're already seeing it on Twitter/X, right? Oh my God, this person's followed by Vitalik. Like this person must know something. Oh, they're
Yeah,
followed by
yeah,
A16Z.
yeah.
They must be a builder, right? So if you're able to not just take that, but actually have a score that is reflected, and not just a score based on a like, but also based on all these different applications. And you can claim that you got a board day, but you also did something creative on X platform and on this. The more you have these points in this network that agrees together that these points are valuable, because we don't decide, oh, this is worth points. It's we're letting the community decide this is creative, and so this should award X amount of points, right? Because if not, it defies the purpose. If we're the ones deciding, oh, this is worth X points, that creates kind of a problem, right? So in the end, it's like partnering with projects. Um, I mean, we have in the pipeline like 40 plus projects right on networks. Anyway, I'm not here to show the project, but it's really just
Oh, feel free
no,
to.
no. But I think it's what I want to discuss is more this kind of concept of proof of creativity that we're focusing on, and that you do not necessarily need to scan your iris like WorldCoin. That there are other ways that still need to be explored or that are being explored right now in terms of how you can prove that you're a human being and that you are creative, and how can we take off-chain, on-chain points to prove that. So that's really what we're focusing on. And obviously there's a lot of people in the space that are not only working with us but even inspiring us, because that is kind of the direction that we're seeing for digital reputation. And that could be also a massive unlock, because you can partner with Web2. We have like from our old application New Life, we have 40,000 creators. The main concept of New Life is that instead of liking content, you press with your finger on it, the more you liked it. So you kind of create a graph of taste. And it's really interesting because if you keep it very curated with really cool creators, then you can really see the graph of taste of like, oh, this is what these cool creators enjoy. And so you can give kind of rating and scores based on that. So going in that direction is very interesting for reputation, creativity. Obviously, there's lots of use cases down there, right? So that's one of the things that I'm personally excited about, except the gaming and all the other stuff, right?
Yeah. Also, you're larger into coins. Um, and there's been a lot of like these memes and trending and the storylines.
Yeah.
How do those tie into the reputational score? Like if I'm just trading meme coins, I obviously have a lot of on-chain credibility just because I'm a trader, or you're really just
Yeah, that that's
focused on creativity.
no, that's a great point. I mean, obviously, we're launching the mainnet with base end of January,
Hmm.
but right now our focus is on core creative and regenerative networks. So it can be things like Intuition, Gitcoin, CyberConnect, these kinds of projects that are like have already a reputation in the space. For now, we're
Yep.
staying away from projects that are related to like gambling predictions, because obviously there can be a lot of creative elements there, but we're more concerned about the creative endeavor of like you're an artist and you created something, or you love this artist and you do something creative to interact with them. Whereas buying a meme coin in itself, it's debatable, but we don't consider that as a creative act, right? Obviously, down the line, we could argue that because you bought a meme coin, you get a tiny bit of score because that proves that you're a human, but not really, because today there's bots to buy meme coins. So it really
Yeah.
has to
Yeah.
have that creative aspect. But yeah, going back to the notion you mentioned of meme coins, I think it's also all about the storytelling. I think that just going back to the executive conversation, like anything, for me, I think it's about storytelling. And meme coins are very good at storytelling, or some would say bullshitting. But either way, both can be kind of tied together, right? It's like if you build a narrative that is strong enough that you have an underlying tech that's not advanced, just very basic. It's a token. There's not really utility. They're just a community that really strongly supports. Already that in itself, I would argue, has done a better job than builders in the space that are working very hard, much more, but they're
Yep.
not focusing on storytelling. And for VCs, for retail, if you want to get these people, you need storytelling. If you want other builders, you don't need the storytelling. You just need cool tech. So,
Well, you need it
well,
too
I'm
to tell the
exaggerating,
story of
but
the tech, because even if you have the best tech, as long as you don't make me realize how much I need it, or that I need it, or that it even exists, this kind of doesn't work, right? Like, but then the language becomes the difference, and that's what you're probably referring to. Like, if you're technically shilling me something, you're talking about the technical benefits of it, which might not sound like a story, but is a story to my developer heart.
And
Where with a meme coin, you're probably just telling a regular story, and then it's more relatable for the
and
non-tech
yeah,
people.
and I think also like I'm gonna grossly exaggerate. So like, don't take every word of what I'm gonna say to heart. But someone that comes into crypto today because they've heard about meme coins, right?
Yeah,
Why did we see? It's not the only reason, obviously, but why did we see Solana have such a huge pump, right, in the last week slash month, right? Well, number one, there's been a lot of airdrops, cool projects. People put a bit of money. You hear the story. Wow, this guy like got 10,000 by just staking one Solana. Like, what the hell happened?
yeah.
And number two, it's like buying a meme coin on Solana is very cheap and fast. At least that's the
Yeah.
way retail understands it.
Well, it is though.
When you go on Ethereum, you go on Uniswap. It's a platform where you can exchange tokens, right?
Yeah,
There's gas fees, and already if you're not in crypto, you don't understand what gas fees are. So what you understand is that you're paying $30 to $50 to buy a token, and most people in meme coins, they're not putting thousands of dollars. They're
no,
probably
they're
putting
spending $30 to $100 in
exactly,
total.
exactly. So already there's that huge barrier, right? And so forget talking about L2s like optimism, arbitrum, like they're not even gonna get there. So they're like, I don't want to pay these fees. What's the other option? Oh, I heard about Solana. I heard about things like Avex. Okay, this is much cheaper. And so the story ends there. It's like, how do I get a MetaMask? Okay, I buy on Binance or Coinbase my token. I send it there. That's already a lot of effort for most people. And then I'm going to buy the meme coin, and it's going to cost a couple cents. But they're happy with this
Yep.
because they got millions of tokens and it costs them nothing, right? So already, like, even going to the layer ones, like a lot of people have a hard time differentiating them. And even me myself sometimes, right? Like there's so many, there's differences in transaction speed, etc. So it's
Yep.
already that in itself for people that are not builders, not in crypto, is a huge blocker. And this is why, fortunately or unfortunately, Solana has been doing so well. And you can probably expect next year that with gaming and also meme coins, it's going to still be a thing because it's simple to understand. Even if you don't play a game, you understand the concept of a game. Even
Yep.
if you don't understand the utility of a meme coin, you see that it's doing well and people are laughing about it. You know, so
which
so
which which,
it's
which is
simple.
what it's all about, right? It's a meme. Like it's meant to be enjoyed.
Exactly. But also an interesting point, and I think that's what scares also executives a lot, is like when that joke is worth hundreds of millions in market cap. And I think that's an interesting point that's not discussed enough is
It
like,
scares the right executives, and it doesn't scare the wrong ones. I feel like, because that's why you get a lot of grifters in the space who are like, wait,
yeah,
I can just do that to get a couple hundred mil. Oh yes, please. Well,
yeah,
then you have the executive of the big brands where you're like, wait, if I actually get a big brand or just a founder who wants to build some cool stuff into the space and commit to the space honestly, that is the actual benefit that you need instead of just taking out a couple hundred mil.
yeah,
Like
exactly. So
nothing wrong against taking out a couple of hundred mil. It just might not be the best. Just looking from a pure for society standpoint.
but I mean, yeah, just to tie the whole conversation together, like in the end, it's storytelling and entertainment and value. Like all of that is kind of tied together. And blockchain works as trust machines. And I think
Yeah,
that not only is it trust machines, but it can potentially empower these different aspects. You can empower entertainment, you can empower value, and you can empower like kind of just the profit element, right? So it's like, why would you not use it? It's the same with AI. Why would you not try to use AI if you can gain benefits in terms of like, your workforce, simplifying the work of your employees? It doesn't mean that you have to use it, but you should think about it. And I think a final kind of good example is I have a lot of friends who are kind of consultants, in like Web2 companies, and it takes 6 months, 6 months to years for just a company to implement things like Microsoft Office and tools. Like let's not forget that point. I'm not even joking. They will have like I'm not going to name companies, but a lot of companies. I'm not saying one or two. Like a lot of companies will hire like whole teams of consultants, pay them a lot of money so that they can implement these new tools. Within the company, like Microsoft Outlook, Office, Excel, but like at a higher level, right? And just that takes months, if not years. So if
yeah,
you're starting to think about AI, that also from data security, that's like a whole new topic. And also when we're talking about blockchain, it's like a lot of people will get excited about the potential, But I think with executives, it's also like reassuring them that it's not going to take years to implement, that you can start with a
Yeah,
very simple use case, even like use case internally. You don't have to go to your end customers if you don't want to risk it. Let's just try, first of all, as you mentioned earlier, before the call, like having a DAO within a company. Let's
yeah,
just see what the employees think about a certain topic. Maybe they could put money. Everyone wants to have, I don't know, a free meal every couple months or something like that. Well, let's just pool money together and vote on decisions. And just little things like that, first of all, make it interested for a company, are simple enough to implement and don't require months of consultants, unless you as a service say that you're going to do everything. But the reality is that that will only work with small startups, because when you're talking to companies who have thousands of employees, they're not going to risk implementing at a large scale, right? Like it's too risky. And I think that's, I oftentimes also forget this. And when I'm at dinners and they're like, oh, it's 6 months since I'm on this and they still don't get how to do that. And I'm like, okay,
yeah,
like if they can't already do Microsoft Office stuff, like there's a long way to go, right?
yeah. Also, there's a lot of benefit to the social and the user being closer with tools like Farcaster. So
Yeah,
you can actually have a quick prototype where you can just build a little bit of tech, tie it together, and you can already access around 20,000 daily active users. I think that's around the number, or monthly, I'm not sure. Um, but you can likely get around 20,000 users to test your crypto idea and just validate it, which makes it even cheaper, because then
yeah,
instead of spending $100,000 to get something built and then add it on top another 500,000 in marketing budget just to make sure that it sticks, or that you know if it sticks or not, you just have, oh, $100,000 in development cost, and you have $50,000 in marketing costs because you just need some people to play a little bit of Twitter and Farcaster, and then
yeah.
you're done. And
And
you can
even just from
leverage things like Bounty Caster,
exactly, yeah, I was gonna get to that. It's
where
true,
you
like
get people to pay. Like Bounty Caster is a cool idea. I also discussed that in the episode with Chris, where we also talked about the DAOs. So for those interested, um, the Bounty Caster idea, if you want to explain it, Jordan, go ahead.
I mean, essentially, a bounty caster is, I will say, I will pay you $50 or 100. You set the amount. You give a date to do it, and you essentially give a task, and anyone can participate and give their answer. And at the end, you kind of choose what you're satisfied with. So
Yep.
please give me a list of the top 10 biggest influencers in gaming. Actually, that's one of the recent bounty caster ones. And so you had people that submitted their list, and at the end, me as the owner, I'll decide what list was the most beneficial to me, and I'll just reward. And it's very simple to use. Anyone can
Yep.
participate, and it can
You
be
can
on
also
any
you
topic.
can also do multi-redemption. So you can say, "Oh, I have built a prototype of a blockchain app. Anyone who uses the prototype and gets to say like the third step, and say it's a social thing because it's easiest to explain, the one who signs in and has liked 3 posts and commented once will get $10. If you do a 30-minute feedback call with our team, you will get another $50. So you just spend $60 for someone to go through your sign up flow,
Yeah,
interact with the at least 3 posts, because they have to like three if they just do the first three once. If you make sure that this experience, like you have around 5 minutes of their time in their app, if you make that experience solve a problem, you have users. And
yeah,
then you just pay that, you have a customer acquisition cost of $10,
exactly.
and you
And
have a feedback loop cost of $50. I'm just running Google ads right now, and people are telling me that, oh, a customer acquisition cost around $200 is awesome. So
and,
yeah,
and and that's where like companies, right, are spending like thousands and thousands on consultants. And don't get me wrong, like that's not a bad thing, but it's just sometimes you just got to look at the core problem, ask people, and it doesn't have to cost a fortune. And that's why like
no,
tools like Farcaster and Bountycaster are so unique, is that we're seeing them more in Web3. Of course, there's similar things that exist in Web2 through surveys, through rewards, but even that is like through spam, through emailing. Sometimes you click on links, you're not even sure if it's a scam. Whereas here, you
yeah,
know that, okay, this is legit. And
yeah.
that is a game changer, that with blockchain in general, is that not everything, of course, you got to still be careful, but there's this authenticity and legitimacy, and that's like the game changer, right?
It for sure is. Also, in general, if you think about blockchain, are there any guidelines, like things to look at, or some of your favorite resources, if like executives and people in general want to read into that?
I don't know if this is a good answer that I'm going to give, but there's two things. Number one, I think that VCs that do research on topics are very interesting. Like I love the works of like 1KX because it's really focused on consumers, and so they do research papers on like digital identity and like what are the different potentials there. But also like sometimes you shouldn't go complicated. And like I personally hate white papers where you have 50 pages and it's very very technical. Sometimes just seeing how your user understands the product, or just even going on YouTube, sometimes I just like going there and typing a project and seeing what is said about it. And like be careful, there's a lot of rubbish, there's a lot of like scams and all, but it's just interesting to see how people understand it. And obviously just generally for resources, obviously just even things like simplify, like if you type like what is blockchain, I think one of the first things is like what is blockchain simplified. Like 5-minute
Yeah,
videos
yeah,
that just
yeah,
explain
yeah.
are really good. But generally speaking, yeah, like just research papers from VCs are really interesting. Like you learn a lot about what they're interested in, and it's also a really cool insight because you can see what they're investing in. I mean, not to say that you should invest in these kinds of projects, but it gives you also a big insight because if you love investing in gaming and you don't really know where to start, well, you could start with Animoca. They invest massively in the metaverse and gaming. And I'm not saying that you should buy these projects necessarily, but you should understand that they're investing millions and millions of dollars in these projects. And so it's good to follow along and see what they're building, whether that's on Twitter or Farcaster, because you stay on top of the game. And in the end, if you're playing that speculative game, you need to be ahead of the curve, right? So,
Awesome. What do you think is the biggest opportunity in Web3 today?
um, does it have to have utility, or can I just say opportunity?
Opportunity.
No, then I still would say gaming, honestly,
Yeah.
because gaming doesn't have to just be a game. It can also be used to onboard customers through technical products. Like the what's the name? Just the dinosaur on Google, right? Like
Yeah.
even that in itself is a game. You're bored or you don't have internet, you play it. And so I like to see more games like this where there's not necessarily tokens. It's just
So like more small games, like
yeah,
the
more
little mini
small
games.
games where like, for example, you just play a game like the dinosaur, you die, and every time you die, you have a little box that says, "Oh, do you want to learn about this protocol?" And
Yeah.
like just little things like this. I think it's just a good way to onboard. But obviously, I'm very bullish, as I mentioned earlier, on like kind of creators and creative reputation. I think that that's like the massive use case because that's tied to gaming, that's tied to regenerative practices, that's tied to DAOs. Like literally, how you can take this trust element, this reputation, and build an algorithm for Web3. Like for me, that's the massive unlock, but it's not easy to do, right? So I have to go with gaming as the easiest go-to to onboard.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll put your Farcaster and
Sure, yeah, I need to grow
in
my
the
forecaster.
in the
It's a bit
description so
mean.
people can ask you questions around all that. Also follow you. Like you should probably get a lot more like replies and discussions started over there. We
I mean,
should,
I would, and just a final shout out actually to a Farcaster user. I
yeah.
would shout out Sursu from Black Hand and from Stadium because they're working on what on-chain gaming could look like and bridging Web 2 and Web 3 esports. So like that's one project I'm super excited about.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, mate.
No, thank you so much. It was great.
Thank you for listening, and thanks for the guests for coming on to Techsuite for the C-Suite. In the description below, or the show notes, whatever you want to call them, you will find the awesome resources our guests mentioned to get you started. You can find links to our guests, and you all can also find a summary, takeaways, and other links to keep connected with the show. Thank you so much for listening. Have an awesome day.